Hello everyone, and welcome to the first webinar of PRINCE2 Primer, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward, and I'll be your MC today and for each webinar in this series. And your mentor is Brenton Burchmore, who you'll hear from shortly. Before we begin, some housekeeping, and we'll put up a poll to get an idea of who is attending the course while I go through some details. You can enter your answer as I'm going through it. I'll just go through the questions for those who are watching remotely or not remotely, sorry, later in the week as they can't see the recordings. How would you describe your current project management expertise? I'm a beginner in projects in general. I have done project work, but not much in its management. I have some working knowledge of project management activities. I have good experience in the management of projects. And I know quite a lot about project management, but not all of the methods. You're all answering that one. 300 of you so far. I'll go through some details. All webinars for this course will be held at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, with recordings made for those of you who cannot attend on a given night. Despite this, if you can make it, we really do hope you attend the live webinars and help us by contributing to a collaborative learning environment. On that contribution, for those who've not used Zoom for webinars before, just a few words on its function. We encourage the asking of questions and the use of chat during the webinar, and there are two ways to do so that we use. We ask that you direct all course content related questions to the Q&A section, those questions that you want Brenton to answer. In most cases, the buttons for these options, by the way, run across the bottom of the window, and you can have a play as you really can't break anything. So yeah, the course content questions related to the Q&A section, and administration type questions to the support team in the chat function. You can choose to chat with panelists only, or to all of your fellow students as well, or even privately by toggling through the drop-down box once you've opened the chat log on the bottom left. Given the enormous cohort, where we likely won't get to all questions, but if something is particularly important to you, do ask again, or even ask your fellow students in the chat, because there's usually some very experienced industry-based students who will be most helpful. Almost every course has had that. For those who've never taken part in a short course with us, IT Masters is a training organisation that exists as a partner to CSU, who we work with to create and deliver a number of their master's courses. We also market those courses on their behalf and think and hope that the best way to do that is to give some of it away free. If we do a good enough job, then students will be encouraged to enroll in the full masters if it suits them. But with that said, we hope that these courses stand alone in their own right and are their own reward. We want you to learn some useful information, hopefully have some fun, and make some connections with your fellow students through the forums and now the chat function with Zoom. We have a big team from IT Masters on hand today in administrative and technical support roles. A fun fact, they're on a team building trip, so likely throwing popcorn at a computer screen. So hello to all of you up there. They are also responsible for the learn.itmasters.edu.au website, which is where you'll find all materials needed for this course, Brenton's pre-recorded lectures, the discussion forums, and quizzes. If you have any questions today or later on, please feel free to contact us using the details on that page. I'll just close that poll now, as most of you have answered. And I'll share the results on screen. The winner was with 32%. I have some working knowledge of project management activities. Then we've got, I have done project work, but not much in its management, 25%. I'm a beginner in projects in general, 15%. Good experience in management of projects, 18%. And know a lot about project management, but not all of the methods, with 11%. Later, Jason Howarth of CSU will be along to talk about a research participation opportunity that you can also get info about on the learn.itmasters.edu.au course page. So if you have any questions about that, he will answer those. But for now, I'll hand you over to Brenton Burchmore. Brenton is our Senior Project Management Lecturer and Subject Writer. He's basically written all of the subjects in project management that we run. He's also short courses in a number of these short courses, and they consistently rate among the most well-received and have some of the largest cohorts. With 2 decades experience, there's no one I'd rather be emceeing this course with, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy meeting Brenton Burchmore. Please make him welcome.
Hi, Guy. Thanks very much for that intro. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the first MOOC, the first topic on the MOOC on Primer on PRINCE2. We've got lots of things to talk about over the next 4 weeks, the next 4 subjects. So we're going to try and squeeze as much in as we can today. Usually we have a few extra things to talk about. And we've previously used different software for this. So for those of you who might have done some of the others with us before, you might not have seen me in the window, which you can now see. I'm broadcasting from sunny Singapore, where I'm based, over here on the equator, where we have 2 kinds of weather here in Singapore. We have hot and wet, and we have wet and hot. So for those of you who've been to Singapore, you know what I mean, or anywhere around the equator in the tropical areas. Now, a few things to talk about. I'm going to close the poll, put that out of the way. So, right, upcoming short courses. There are some other short courses. Just a quick note for you guys to let you know what's going on. There's a cyber warfare course that's coming up in the next few weeks. January, Doctor of Information Technology Primer. February, there's a short course on digital investigation, and Unity AR Masterclass in March. These are all free courses, and you can get details on those from the learn.itmasters website. Is that right, Guy? Is that where they should look to get the links for these to sign up?
Not the learn.itmasters, that's for this short course in particular, any short courses they're logged into. But if you go to itmasters.edu.au, I'll post all the links soon in the chat.
Okay, so if anyone's interested in any of these, they can find them from the portal somewhere, or get referred back to the sign-up page for those.
Yep.
So just a quick clarification for those of you who are unsure, all these short courses get recorded, all these webinars get recorded. So you'll find that after this is uploaded and done, sometime within the next 24 hours, usually within a few hours after the webinar is finished, the recording will be made available. So you don't need to take notes, etc. You can just sit back and enjoy it and listen to what goes on. You can play back the recording later if you want to take notes and get some details from it. Now, this is done obviously as part of CSU, Charles Sturt University. Charles Sturt University is the university that runs all of the actual qualifications and degrees that we work with. So the subjects, the full subjects that this is all part from or drawn from, that's all part of the subjects or the courses with IT Masters and CSU. So IT Masters does a number of the subjects, usually a lot of the industry subjects. The university does a lot of the academic subjects, and together that gets put to a master's of this or a master's of that, etc. What you're going to go through here is material and content that's directly taken from the full course. So there is a full course, one of the subjects being redeveloped on PRINCE2, and everything here is what's part of what's covered there, although 2.5 times as much is what we cover in the full subject. Now, I noticed that there's lots of people putting lots of comments in the chat area, which is great. And just a reminder, if you want all of your other students or the other attendees to see it, make sure you change the drop-down box to say all panelists and attendees, and then everyone can see it. But if you have questions that you need to aim at us, put them in the Q&A box, which is a different box, which is where we can look at particular questions. There's 2 kinds of questions you might have. Questions about how this all works, and we'll get a lot of those will be answered by text by one of the people that's helping us with this now. If you've got questions about the content, what I'm going to be talking about over the next 45 minutes or so, then we'll periodically pause and grab some of those questions and talk through them. Now, if we do get more questions than I can answer that we have time for, we'll do our best to prioritize them. We'll do our best to cover them. But I do want to say that if we have questions that I think we're likely to cover later in some of what we're talking about in either later this week or subsequent weeks, then I will skip those questions and ask you to hang on to them until we get to that material so that we can come back to them. And any questions we don't get to today during the webinar discussion, feel free to put them in the forums later. We are limited to time, obviously. We don't want to keep everyone here all day, but those questions, put them up in the forums. As Guy mentioned before, there'll be lots of people there who'll be able to give you useful answers and often an ongoing discussion about it. Now, who am I? Well, Guy has given you a bit of an idea. I obviously do some lecture work with IT Masters and CSU. I obviously design and write courses. I think I've probably done about a dozen subjects that I've authored and presented over the years for Charles Sturt and IT Masters. I wasn't always, I've been doing this for about the last seven or 8 years. I've been designing and delivering this sort of material. Prior to that, I had a very corporate existence. So, I was mostly in the technology industry, communications, networking, etc. And I had a couple of decades there where I was doing all the usual things, but I had quite a varied career through all of that. So I was involved in sales and I was involved in operations, networking, technical, project delivery, etc. So I've kind of seen it all from different perspectives. And when it comes to project management, one of the things that what I've discovered through all of this is that projects are pretty much the same kind of beast, but they're viewed very differently by people from different teams. It really depends on what part of the project you get hit with, often determines how you feel about it. So hopefully what I'm going to try and do over the next 4 weeks is to give you a good primer and an understanding of what PRINCE2 is all about, but to try and do so with a context of seeing it from different points of view. So we're going to talk a little bit about why things the way they are. We're going to try and put a bit of real world context around it and hopefully give you some of that background knowledge that helps put it into a bigger picture. I have recently done a couple of courses as well. I'm graduating at the end of this year from a Master's of MBA in Computing and a Master of ICT in Education. So I'm a student as well. I've done these with CSU. So I'm sort of doing the same thing that some of you might be doing or might soon be doing. As a student, so I understand the student's perspective, so I know how that all works. And as a personal thing, I am also a passionate champion of game-based learning. So I believe very strongly in experiential and practical learning methods. Now, some people are saying my volume is a little low. I'm going to just move a little closer to my microphone and see if that gets a little easier for everyone. Make sure everyone can hear me. All right. Let's talk about where PRINCE2 came from. I'm going to go through a bit of a background of what was the origins of PRINCE2. Things began way back in the 1970s. Actually, if you talk about project management, things about project management began decades before that. We had Henry Gantt, who before World War I came up with his Gantt chart that we're all often quite familiar with today. Still tried and true method. Then we had developments through the 1950s, 1960s, where project management, the modern project management really came into its fruition then. Things like the Department of Defense development, the Polaris missile, which was one of the more complex development defense projects, used the PERT system, Program Evaluation Review Technique. And so that project was credited with introducing those sorts of techniques back in the 50s. But in 75 or thereabouts, there was this private organization in the UK called Simpact Systems. And they had a system called PROMPT. And we love our acronyms in project management. Well, we love our acronyms in business in general. PROMPT stood for Project Resources, Organization, Management and Planning Techniques, as you'd expect. So this is where it started. But what happened after that is that a few years later, the UK government decided to adopt that methodology. They decided to take that on and say, okay, well, this seems like a cool way of doing stuff, but it was very IT related because that's what Simpact did. So it was very focused on how to run IT projects, technology projects, information systems projects. What happened after that, some years later, an entire decade, PRINCE came about because the UK government turned to one of its own bureaus and said, look, build us something from this that is usable outside of just technology projects, something that's a little broader than that. And so PRINCE came about. And PRINCE, again, is an acronym, was referring to the projects in controlled environments. And it was published by government, UK government, and the CCTA, I think, is the Central Computer Telecommunications Association, something to that effect. So they created this and they owned it. Then PRINCE2 came along in 1996 because they needed something that could be used by more than just government departments. They wanted something that was usable for a wider range of projects and by enterprise. So they got about 150 odd other European organizations involved and they revamped PRINCE They called it PRINCE2. And this made things more suitable for non-IT projects. It made it a little bit more all-purpose. 2009, there was a major revision. And this revision, again, made things a little more high level. It introduced the principles. Now, the principles is what we're going to go through today. So what this meant was that it was suitable for small projects and large, because what was happening in this era, in around the 2000s, was a lot of specialized organizations with unique expertise were able to offer what they could do into a larger project. So it meant that there was a need for the UK government to be able to embrace the work that smaller, niche, boutique kind of organizations could do and bring them into the fold of a large organized project. And so PRINCE2 had to evolve into something that was a little more acceptable to different organizations. 2013, the Cabinet Office, who used to control the copyright, etc., handed everything over to Axelos. And it became a little more open at that point. And this is what led to the embracing of agile principles. Then most recently, 2017, we have a new update, which has focused even more on the tailoring of PRINCE2, how PRINCE2 can be adapted and evolved into different things. So if you look at the evolution of this over the decades, it has become less prescriptive. It has become more adaptive. It's become more universally applicable. And that's the direction that PRINCE2 has gone. I don't think they're going to change it or call it PRINCE3, because PRINCE2 is now, it's branding now. And it's no longer run by the government. So it's now something that Axelos wants to keep as recognizable. Now, a lot of you are going to have questions about how to compare one system to another, and we will cover that. But I don't want to jump in there now too much. We'll do that throughout this discussion today. We'll cover bits of it. But what I'm hoping is that as we go through today, we'll give you enough understanding so that you can start to see the differences yourself, because a lot of you will be familiar with some other system. But what I will do for next week, I'll do a specific pre-recorded lecture specifically talking about some key differences between the different methodologies and how they fit together. So I will go through that in more detail, but hopefully by the end of today, you'll have some of those answers already. Now, to begin that discussion, here is a way of looking at it that sort of sets the scene for everyone. Let's look at this and go through it in a bit more detail. Here, the idea of project methodologies, the themes and principles, this is the high level stuff. So a theme is a way of thinking about something. It's an idea, it's a philosophy. A principle is a way to apply that philosophy. But principles are things that influence decisions. Principles are the things that are guiding ideas. They're not prescriptive, they're not detailed, they're not telling us exactly what to do. Processes are telling us what to do. So a process is a set of activities, a series of actions that says, well, you know, you do this, you do this, you do this. And you can see from this, if you look at the processes list, okay, so waterfall is generic waterfall. Waterfall being the kind of project management that does one thing before the next thing. So step one, complete that. Step two, complete that. Step three, complete that. And things flow from one stage to the next. A generic waterfall sequential type of project is full of processes. It's full of how do we do it? The Project Management Institute, or Project Management Body of Knowledge, and I'm going to call it PMBOK just because I've got that habit now. We'll call it PMBOK. So the PMBOK deals with a lot of processes, tons of them. And it spells out pretty clearly what to do in each situation. But it doesn't talk a great deal about why we do it this way. If you look at PRINCE2, and we look specifically at this part of PRINCE2, you can see that it stretches right back into the philosophy, if you like, of project management. So PRINCE2 is talking about what are the guiding principles that we should think about for any project, even before we get to the actions of the processes. Now, if you see the blue and the red here, the red items below it, these are the agile philosophy methods. So you can see that lean is a theme. Lean is a very high level idea. Lean in a nutshell is waste less, do more with less. Now, okay, admittedly, theme is a lot more than that, but lean is, how to do that is more complex in lean. But lean is about, you know, let's avoid wastage. So it's a very high level idea. Agile is a way of saying, okay, well, let's make decisions a certain way. Let's make decisions later. Let's say we don't know the answer. How are we gonna do that? What's our principles for running a project in this way? But then you move into the processes and you look at things like Scrum. Scrum is all about the iteration. It's all about the cyclic nature of work. Do a bunch of stuff, stop. Do a bunch of stuff, stop. This is the Scrum nature. And it is something that is a process within the principles of Agile. Kanban, which is, all about flow, or Scrumban, which is, it's a bit of those two. It's like Bambi and Godzilla welded together. Actually, it's not quite like that, but you get these agile processes. Extreme programming is a way of delivering software that says, okay, well, this is how we do it. Follow these steps, use these processes. Now, PRINCE2 has some of those, but they are inherited from what PRINCE2 is really trying to do and be that's different, which is the themes and the principles up front. So all of the processes that we get, even in PRINCE2, are flexible. They're adaptable. They're things that we should be thinking about differently. So this gives you a bit of an idea of where things sit. And if you look at the standards end of things, standards is about how to have a level of excellence with the processes that we're working with. Now, only PMBOK in the waterfall arena, only PMBOK goes that far in this list, because PMBOK is saying, okay, not only are we saying what to do, we're saying it so explicitly that we can define something as a standard that if you do it this way and you do it this well, then you're meeting a certain standard. And the PMBOK can do that and can say that because it has enough detail in it to allow that. PRINCE2 doesn't go that deep. It doesn't try to do that. So you can see across the bottom, it's saying that the further down this list we go, the more we increase the specificity of exactly what's meant to happen. Now, let me give you a quick poll. Guy will put this up for us in a moment. Which of the following project methods are most used in your organization? And you can tick more than one in this particular one. So this is to get everyone an idea to understand how much of this stuff is used in your organization. Tick all that apply. I need to give you guys polls now and again so I can pause and have a drink.
And just for those who are watching later in the week, we've got options of PMI, PMBOK, PRINCE2, other generic waterfall, Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, and other generic agile. And given it's a multiple choice, we've got some interesting percentages, but it looks like there's a fairly even spread. %70 voted so far. I'll leave it up for another 10 or so seconds.
If you don't have any option to tick, that's okay. You don't have to tick one. This is just to give everyone an idea of what their peers are facing. So we all get to see how the world looks from the project management point of view. What do we got? 600 attendees at the moment.
650 almost, and we've got 500 voting. And quite interestingly, PMBOK, PRINCE2, generic waterfall, Scrum, and generic agile, all sort of within sort of 5% of each other, from 37 to 43. And then Kanban and extreme programming quite a lot lower. I'll share the results now. And yeah, what do you make of that, Brenton?
So this is pretty close to what I would have expected. Extreme programming is very particular. It's very specific. It's something you use in explicit circumstances with certain kinds of programming. So it's often pretty small. Kanban also is not as popular, certainly in this region. You'll find in other areas, in Northern Asia in particular, you'll find Kanban available, more often used. Certain industries will use it. So for the rest of it, it's actually pretty even. And a lot of people here are using PRINCE2 and have PRINCE2 in their organization. And I guess that's a lot of reason why they're here and enrolled, which is great. But to see the other stuff, hopefully it's giving everyone an idea that really project management, there are many ways to do this. And organizations often have more than one method. Organizations will often say, right, well, for this fast and loose project that we don't really know what's going on, we need to be more agile about it. So let's Scrum that one. But for this other thing that's going to run over the next 3 years, and we have to plan it all in advance, you know, we're going to use a bit of PRINCE2 for the principles behind it. But then some of the processes, we're going to go with the PMBOK method. And you can do that because you've got PMBOK very deeply ingrained in the processes area. You can borrow from PMBOK, and PRINCE2 says that's fine. PRINCE2 says, look, you use what you need to use, and there's going to be some good stuff in PMBOK. A lot of people who practice both will tell you, look, they can work side by side quite well. Others will say that if you're looking for a mentality or a philosophy or an idea, it's difficult to go with both. And there are some areas of terminology which we will bump into over the next few weeks, where you'll see, look, they do conflict in a couple of places, and you have to resolve those issues of how the terminology means one thing in one system and another thing in the other. But hopefully that's given you all a bit of an idea that says, well, there's a fairly broad spread of what's going on with these different things. Now, PRINCE2 at a glance, let's start with the helicopter view. So this is the sort of thing that we're going to look at over the next few weeks. There are 7 principles. Now, we've just looked at the graphic that talks about the fact that principles sit above the processes. So principles are the guiding forces, and this is what we'll go through with the remainder of our time today. There are 7 themes. Now, the themes, these are things that we manage throughout the project. This is what we're going to cover next week. And the 7 processes we're going to cover in week 4. So let's look at these in a bit more detail. The 7 principles, these are words to live by. A philosophy on how we should think of what's important in our project. The 7 themes, this is the stuff that we need to take care of on an ongoing basis. So things like risk have to manage on an ongoing basis. Things like quality is an ongoing issue. Things like planning is an ongoing issue. And we will discuss these in more detail next week and give you an overview of those. The processes are phases of management. There are 7 major processes. Now, within those, there's a lot of detail. And we're going to go through these over these weeks. In week 4, we're going to cover some of the processes and hopefully use those as an example for you to then be able to extrapolate more processes, because we just can't go through all of them in the time we have in a short course. In the full subject with the university, we do go through all of them. We spend a couple of weeks or a few weeks on those. Week 3, what's week 3 going to be about? We're going to talk about this from a business point of view. So having done week 1 and week 2 to give you a bit of a brain dump on what is PRINCE2, we're then going to talk in week 3 about the business perspective. So we're going to talk about business case, business justification. We're going to talk a bit about how the business would do some of these things in a real and practical sense. So we're going to contextualize a lot of this for you in week 3. And then week 4, we'll do some processes, talk about those. So let's talk about the key ideals of PRINCE2, and then I'll just check and see after that if you have any questions. So if you've been sitting on a question about the content that we're talking about, put it in the box now, and we'll tackle it at the end of this slide and see what questions we've got to cover then. And we'll try and do some questions periodically through the discussion today. So the key ideals. Now, this isn't stuff that you're going to see written in black and white in the book. This is an interpretation of, well, what does it really mean? So PRINCE2 is a lot about tailoring. It's a lot about flexibility. It's not like, let's join the dots. It's about saying, well, we need to be adaptable. We need to do what's appropriate. Because PRINCE2 is saying no 2 projects are the same, but we have ideas, we have principles that are going to be applicable to every project. Things that are going to be relevant in all cases. So PRINCE2 is strong on flexibility. PRINCE2 also focuses on the benefits. It's the outcomes that matter. It's the results that matter. So once again, PRINCE2 is saying, look, we're not too worried as much about the details of how it gets done as we are worried more about what happens at the end. So this is something that you can take too far. You can say, well, look, the ends justifies the means, and really we should just do anything we feel like. It's not quite that flexible, but it's an emphasis on saying, okay, well, if we have a method that works, then that's probably the best method. It also says that why we're doing something is often more important than what the activity actually is. This is not to say that, what we're doing isn't important, but if we retain this understanding of why we're doing something, then we will be able to adapt and make it flexible and make it suitable. If we lose sight of the why about anything that we do in project management, then we run the risk of the what that we do not producing what we need. So PRINCE2 reminds us, and we'll get that feeling hopefully through the principles and themes, it reminds us to be clear on our intentions and to let that guide our actions. Be clever, not careful. No, that doesn't mean we're careless. What I mean is it's an emphasis. It's about learning from what we did before. It's about learning from the information that we have. It's about adapting and evolving. It's not just about, carefully and specifically joining the dots to draw a picture of something ugly. It's about saying, well, this is what we need to evolve and adapt and do. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Agile, you're going to be thinking, well, maybe this sounds a bit Agile in nature. Well, strictly speaking, Agile methodologies are very structured in different ways. They are there to solve different problems. They're there to solve problems where we don't have the information yet. PRINCE2 can adapt to that, but PRINCE2 also can work with waterfall projects where we do have the answers, but we're using the information that we have. We're making the decisions that we have to make the most of where we're at right now, not simply following the yellow brick road. And PRINCE2 has an idea that says, well, we're trying to be efficient about what we do. We're not here to do everything and to gild the lily and make sure that's all perfect. And we tick every box, we dot every I, cross every T, and we make sure everything's robust in our project method. It's not really what PRINCE2 is trying to do. PRINCE2 is saying, well, we do what works, and we do it where and how it works. We're not here to tick off everything and check it all and make sure it's all perfect. We're here to do the bits that are important and the bits that are necessary. So it's about being efficient with our project management and not over managing something. And some of that will come out we talk about the principles today. Now, let me have a look at some of the questions that have come up. We have a few here. I'll see if I can go through some of these. Guy, we've got a few questions here.
We sure do. I've marked those as that I think might be relevant to now as questions we might answer live. But also there's a question from the start from Hong. Do you have links to test exam papers? And I think maybe is that in relation perhaps to PRINCE2 certification or?
But it possibly is. I know that, if you Google it, you'll find that there are sample exams available. Quite often, certification organizations, if you sign up for an exam, you'll get access to their free trial exam. Sometimes you have to buy a seat in the real exam before you get access to their trial exam. Sometimes you'll find things online. We don't have anything ourselves for this. We do have an exam coming up at the end of this short course, but we don't have a trial exam for it. But you may find some of those online if you hunt around. And you might even find someone who knows one who will stick that up in the forums for us, because there's different places you can look for it.
We've got a comment from Paul. You're saying Alexos has sample exams, he believes as well. You just have to be around.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're free or not. At the moment, I think they might be, actually. You might find some there. So I'm just, first time I've used this particular Q&A. So I'm looking at the top here. The first from Roy, any PDUs for this course? Is that one you've tagged, or have you tagged, does that show me the tag one below it?
No, that's one I've tagged, but I was just thinking maybe perhaps we can situate this course. It's a primer.
Yeah, look, I think it should. We're covering the Axelos, straight out of the Axelos book. I mean, everything we're going to talk about here is from the 2017 revision of the Axelos book. The pre-recorded audio that you're listening to, or when you're going to listen to it, that stuff is talking directly about what's in that book. So now, many of you will have that book. Many of you will want to get that book and to have that as you read through it. And I believe that if you attend the full course, we give you that book. But in the short course, obviously, we're not able to give it away. It costs a few dollars. But I think you should find that PDUs should count. But it depends on who you're trying to count it with. I think that it should. Maybe we should do a bit of digging on exactly how we can help do that for the students and post a link about it. But I think PDUs often come down to an individual application. Sunil's asking, web session will be fine to pass exam, or do we get any study materials? You do get study materials. You're going to get pre-recorded, or you have pre-recorded audio lectures each week, which is me talking about the theory. And they sort of average 15 to 18 minutes each. There's usually 3 of them. So occasionally I'll throw in an extra one if you ask for it, if the crowd needs one. But each week is going to have maybe up to an hour at most of pre-recorded audio that's web materials that you can listen to. If you do have the book, we will put the chapters of the book that it refers to each week, so you can read that. If you don't have those, you'll get enough from what we're covering in the pre-recorded and in the webinar to be able to answer our quiz, at least, at the end.
And now I've got some project management specific questions, which is nice. We'll maybe focus on those from now on. But yeah, okay. Phil's asked about what about if we don't actually use any official method?
I think Phil's question was in relation to the poll earlier.
If
you don't have an official method, but if you kind of follow the ideals of PRINCE2, then you actually do have an official method, and it's called PRINCE2. And really, not many other methodologies could do that, can claim that. If you say, okay, well, my philosophy of project management is like this, and it happens to be the same things that PRINCE2 says is important, then maybe you could say, okay, well, maybe there's a couple of extra things we should adhere to, and we're actually using PRINCE2, or a good chunk of it. So this is the advantage of PRINCE2, and this is where they've specifically made it something that is not difficult to adopt and embrace. If you don't have an official method, well, then usually what you're working with is experience, people that have done stuff that works. And that's okay. The benefit of an official method is that you can get everyone on the same page. You can talk the same language. You can understand the same thing. When people from other teams and other departments get involved in your project, you can give them a starting point that says, hey, go and sit this 4-week primer with IT Masters on PRINCE2. That's all you need to know about how to take part in this, or others, of course. So there's a benefit in having a solid, agreed methodology. And PRINCE2 is one of the easiest ones to start with, because it just lets you start with the high-level stuff. It's pretty easy to agree upon. It's hard to argue with the principles in PRINCE2 and say that they're not important, because they've done a lot of work to make sure that they are. Carl's saying some of these methodologies seem to be software development focused. PRINCE2 is more generic, can be applied to other types of projects. Absolutely. I think if you're harking back to that diagram, a lot of the agile stuff was specifically created for software development. And in much the same way that even PRINCE2 and PMBOK, et cetera, originated out of the need to control IT projects decades ago and have evolved since then. Agile doesn't have that level of maturity yet. It's starting, it does. I mean, you can use Agile to do anything, but it began in software. So, and because that wasn't terribly long ago, a lot of these methods that have been refined out of the Agile principles have been refined for the benefit of different kinds of software projects. And that's why you get extreme programming on the list. It's specifically a software development system. But certainly I agree with you. You got PRINCE2 that's probably the most generic of the lot. And PRINCE2 has a pretty clearly defined and historically proven set of principles, unlike Agile. I mean, Agile has the principles, but they haven't been around for as long. They're not as widely used and adopted and accepted, and they will be. And one of the things that we'll do is actually, in some ways, we need to line up 2 different things. And I will give you some pre-recorded audio about this. To line up PRINCE2 versus Agile is a principle to principle analysis. To line up PRINCE2 versus the PMBOK from PMI is to compare the 2 most commonly spoken names in waterfall project management. So we'll do more of both of those for you guys and give you something to listen to. All right, so Guy, are those the only questions I've, oh no, good, one more further down. Mohammed saying, why PRINCE2? Why is there a single methodology? Why not there is a single methodology to deliver any sort of project? So hopefully by the end of this discussion now, in another 20 minutes or so, you'll have a good idea of what the principles do. And I think the answer to that question lies in the principles of PRINCE2. When you see these principles and say, okay, if we're doing all of this, our project is probably not a disaster. And for a lot of people, that's as much as you can hope for. And the goal of PRINCE2 in trying to be this overarching methodology is it's saying, well, let's first know enough, do enough, agree enough on something so that it's not a catastrophe. And then from there, we'll drill down on how to make it even better than that. Whereas more prescriptive methods like PMI are saying, well, if you don't follow all of this stuff in detail, precisely, then you're in a world of pain. And it doesn't give you that safety net to say, well, what if this doesn't fit? What if this doesn't work? Well, we've got to figure that out for ourselves. PRINCE2 gives us some ideals to fall back on. And this is why it's become more generic over its evolution.
Beauty, thank you. I reckon we might move on. We got flooded with questions, of course, as always happens as we get to question time, but we might just have to move on.
Now, some of the questions might get answered by text. We might have one of people just reply and close it off, because otherwise my questions box will get bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I'll certainly try and work on that as we go through the next session.
Thanks, Guy. That'd be good. All right, so when we're talking about PRINCE2, let's get into some more of the details now. PRINCE2 has performance variables, and these are things that some of you are going to find very familiar. Some obvious ones. There's 6, right? 6 performance variables, things that we have to manage through the life of the project. Cost, it's the finance thing, right? It's the money. Time, the schedule, how long is it going to take? Quality, what is the quality of what we're going to be delivering? And the quality criteria is the thing that defines whether it's something is acceptable. Is it good enough? Now, these things make sense. They're pretty familiar. We're used to tracking these sorts of things in a project, and these are the big 3. And these are the ones that are going to be the same with PMI or PRINCE2. Scope. Okay, now scope. PRINCE2 says that scope is what's actually being delivered. Remember, PRINCE2, we said, has an emphasis on outcomes and not as much on activity. Whereas if you listen to what the PMBOK and PMI are saying, the language used with PMI is a little more about scope is the work. Scope is the body of work. When you break down the scope of work, you break down the activity that you're doing. So it's kind of the same, but PMI is more focused on what we do to get the results, whereas PRINCE2 is more focused on what are the actual results. So when PRINCE2 talks about scope, it's talking more about the stuff at the end, what's actually delivered. And here's where it really starts to diverge and have its own views. PRINCE2 has benefits. Now, for those of you familiar with PMI or PMBOK, what you'd see right here is resources. So what PRINCE2 says is, well, hang on, we've got the resources that matter. We've got cost, we've got time. Pretty much everything as a resource can be fed into one of those 2 categories. That's PRINCE2's perspective. The PRINCE2 says what we really want to also think about is, why are we delivering this? What's the point? Why is this good for us? Why are we doing this? Because if we keep an eye on that question, then if the answer changes, we can evolve our project. And this gives us a more honest flexibility that says, well, we do a lot of project work. I mean, how many of us have seen projects that have delivered something that doesn't work, isn't suitable, isn't useful, or it might have been useful when the project started, but it's not anymore because things have moved on. Various other reasons where what happens at the end isn't what everyone wished and hoped it would be. PRINCE2 is trying to limit this by saying, well, look, benefits is one of the performance variables that we need to keep track of. Not just what does it do, but how are we going to leverage that and get value out of it? The last one of risk is the same. Risk in all cases, you're going to find a risk. So you see a little bit of variation already. And here, if you're talking about the PMI is going to call these project constraints, and one of them is going to be quite different, but the other 5 are the same. So it's an example of where you need to choose one set of terminology to work with. So principles, let's talk about them. Here they are. I'm going to throw all of them up on a list, and then we'll go through them a few minutes each in detail. Okay, here we go. Continued business justification. I'm not going to discuss them all now. Each one has their own slide. Okay, so we're going to go through them. Learn from experience, having defined roles and responsibilities, managing our project in stages, managing by exceptions, focusing on products and outcomes, and tailoring to suit the project. So these are the principles. Let's go through them in a little detail. Number one, what do we mean by continuous business justification? Well, there has to have been a reason to start the project in the beginning. There's got to be a reason to kick this off. And we have to be clear on that reason. We have to be specific about it. This reason doesn't just get recorded once and forgotten. In PRINCE2, this is something we need to be aware of and revise and keep track of throughout. Continuous business justification, not just once up front. So we don't just do a bit of a sales spiel, a bit of a magic trick, and then we get our budget, we get it approved, and we can relax now. We don't have to justify anything. That's not how PRINCE2 looks at things. What it's saying is that everything we do in our project, all the work that we do, and all of the decisions we make in managing a project towards helping that work happen, it's all got to ultimately support that business case, that justification. That's what it's all for. That's what everything leads to. And so we try and avoid things that are driven by assumption. Well, you know, why are we doing this? Well, we think it'll be good. You know, if we build it, they will come, right? It avoids that. It limits that. It tries to say, no, hang on, let's ask the question again. Why are we really doing this? And should we be doing something different? Should we be doing it at all? PRINCE2 was a lot more confident, a lot more willing to ask us to shut down a project than PMBOK is. It actually wants us to think about that question a lot more often. So it means that, you know, we might more often have a reason to cancel the project. So the takeaway line from this is that all the work we do must be towards an outcome, and all of the outcomes we have need to be worked upon. If we think it's a result that we need, then we need to work towards it. And we don't want to be doing anything that doesn't work towards it. So it's relevance, making sure everything we do is relevant. Number two, learn from experience. Now, I'm going to catch a bunch of questions at the end of these principles. So we'll be able to if you have questions as we go, you can put them up. And but if I answer the question, I think you can cancel or withdraw your question if you need to. So what does learn from experience mean? Project management is something we can do better. I'm sure you'd all agree with that, right? PRINCE2 is really honest about this. PRINCE2 is more than honest. PRINCE2 tells us we need to get better at this on an ongoing basis. It says that we need to learn how we go about project management. We don't just learn to do the practical work that we do. Yes, we should. But we also learn to do the management of that work better. We learn from prior projects. Everything we've done before, every project that we've managed before can help inform us, guide us, instruct us on what we need to learn so we don't make the same mistakes again next time. So we can improve it and get better at it. This is an important principle of PRINCE2. And the more unusual our project is, then the more there is to learn from it. The more important it is to gain any lessons from other projects that we can. And the more important it is to capture what we learn from this project, because it's kind of new, it's kind of different. So the end of the project is another point where we say, okay, we need to record what we've learned from this. Before we start, we make sure that we capture whatever we need to learn and remember from previous lessons. We learn as we go through the project bit by bit. And at the end, we make records of what did we learn that we need to pass on to the next project proactively. So the takeaway line from this, and this is a quote I've put in here. I don't know if there's an owner for this quote. I'm sure wiser people than me have said this. But this is how I view it. No new failure is as foolish as the one that was repeated. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate if we make a mistake that we could have avoided and should have avoided. PRINCE2 makes us think about this stuff. Principle number 3, define roles and responsibilities. What do we mean by that? Well, in PRINCE2, who does what is a lot to do with the power structure. And power is an important thing in project management. Power to make decisions, power to decide, power to govern, power to control. PRINCE2 says we need to have this clear. Because if people don't know what they're empowered to do or who is empowered to make the decision, time is lost, efficiency is lost. So PRINCE2 says, get this stuff sorted out. Make it clear where the power lives, who's empowered and who's responsible, who's meant to do what, who's not. You've got a couple of people in your project team. You've got Fred and Mary. You know, what are Fred and Mary allowed to do? And do they know that? And if that's something outside of what their power decision-making entails, who do they go to? Do they know that? What are Fred and Mary able to delegate downstream from them? And what can't they delegate? Do they know that? PRINCE2 says we should. It means we need to be clear on what the downward delegation and upward escalation pathways should be. Because most things need to happen within their designated role or level in the team. And if it's going to move, we need to be clear on where and how and why it moves up or down, so that everyone's clear, that we don't have uncertainty about who's doing what. Now, here you can see already, we're starting to see things that it's not telling us how to do this. That's up to us. There are a lot of ways we could do this. What it's saying is that this stuff is important. And if we don't have this stuff nailed down, we're not PRINCE2, for starters. And our project might be in a little bit of risk, secondly. It also means in defining roles and responsibilities that all the stakeholders are represented. They're all in there. We're not leaving someone out. We leave someone out, what's going to happen? They're going to speak up later, perhaps in a problematic manner. Those people that we kind of, don't talk to Fred and Mary. Let's leave them out of it. They'll just cause trouble and make noise. Well, what happens halfway through the project? They cause trouble, they make noise, they speak up, and they get to say, hey, you forgot about us. You've got to change everything because you left us out and you shouldn't have. It's PRINCE2 says, get everyone involved, get everyone represented, and if there's issues, resolve them when you need to. So the takeaway line from this is not just having the right people, but it's having people doing the right things. Principle number 4 in PRINCE2, manage by stages, step by step by step. What do we mean by that? What it does, and PRINCE2 says you really only need to have 2 different kinds of stages. You have to have an initiation stage. PRINCE2 says that's one important thing. And then you have management stages, and you can have as many of them as you like. You've got to have at least one. So you have at least an initiation and a management stage, and maybe many more management stages. That's okay too. That forces us to have this separate set of discussions, decisions, things that we do at initiation, so that we get that finished, and we get it all finished, so we have finished all the necessary things to initiate our project. And within the initiation lies the tailoring. So we finish the tailoring that we need to do before we start actually delivering stuff. That's an important thing that PRINCE2 tells us to do. So we can have many management stages after that. But each of these stages becomes a bit of a gateway. It becomes a thing that says, okay, well, at the end of any one stage, we may well and probably should have a decision, do we continue with this project or not? So the stages are important. They're big. It's not like Scrum, where you have an iteration that might finish every 2 weeks. A stage in PRINCE2 is saying, well, do we continue with this project? It can also be driven by budget, like, well, we've got this much money, and in 3 months' time, we'll have this much money, and we've got to decide whether or not we're going to allocate it to this project or not. And that's going to depend upon all of the reports and the information we get from the project at that point. So we have the reporting at the end of the stage that says, well, where are we at? Where have we gone? And this is where we do things like check against the justification. Are we still delivering something that we really want? Is this going to deliver? Do we need to make changes to this if what we want has changed, or what's happening is different? Or are we all good to carry on? Stages force us to make those sorts of decisions. So the takeaway line is to say that any project is only authorized to continue functioning up until it's not, which is a simplistic way of saying there are times when it should not be. And we need to navigate those moments, and we need to have them deliberately. It's not a case of, okay, a project started and no one's got to touch anything until it's done. Doesn't work like that in PRINCE2. Managed by exception. Remember we talked before about the roles and responsibilities. You've got Fred and Mary, and they're working in our project. This is a way of saying that whatever is meant to be handled by Fred and Mary at their level, they handle it. And as a project manager, we don't need to look over their shoulder and mind what they're doing. We've created roles and responsibilities, and we manage by exception by saying, well, okay, if everything's within tolerances, if it's within the boundaries, then they handle it. And the boundaries we talk about are the 6 performance variables that we've just covered recently. So those 6 things, people, teams, levels in our project are going to have a degree of flexibility, a defined set of boundaries that they can work within that says, all right, well, we can work within these. So if it's within that, they manage it. But if it's outside of that, then it's an exception. Then we might handle it differently. It might get escalated. The point is to only use this sort of senior management overhead on items that are necessary, only on things that we need to. We're not micromanaging. We're not helicopter managing. We're not doing all those things. Only when we need to. And we've got a structure that tells us when we need to. So it says that the decisions happen at the lowest appropriate level. And they don't need to happen at a higher level unless they really need to. Okay, 2 more principles. Number 6 is a focus on products. Now, what we mean by products is things that are produced by an activity. I don't mean product as, you know, something that we sell to the public, put on the shelf. Not that kind of product. Product means outcomes. The word is synonymous with things like results, outcome, or things like that. So what this does is it forces us to focus on the result. It's a contrast that says, well, we don't just join the dots and hope the picture looks okay. You know, we focus on the picture every step of the way. It keeps us focused on the result. We keep the end result in mind, lets us work towards it. And it means that we can have less assumption. We don't have this assumption that says, well, I'm doing this stuff because I was told to do it because it was in the project plan. And geez, I hope it's useful. I hope it counts for something. I'm not too sure. Well, PRINCE2 says we don't want to operate like that. And yeah, they're going to be people, they're going to be activities where it kind of feels like that at times. The idea of PRINCE2 is we shouldn't have those assumptions and rely upon them. So the products, the outcomes, we get those from understanding the quality requirements, the quality criteria. It's the key to defining what the results need to look like. So the takeaway point is, it's not always what we do that matters the most, but it's what that results in that matters the most. The last principle is tailoring to suit the project. So every project's unique. Every situation is unique. Every organization, every moment in time is unique. And PRINCE2 says that we're not locked into an artificial straitjacket that says this is how we do it no matter what. PRINCE2 says we'll use what's appropriate. And quite often, we'll be using some processes and activities from PMBOK. We might use some from extreme programming or from Scrum, depending on the nature of our project, or bits of our project might work differently. So Prince says that's okay. PRINCE2 says we can do that. We can work with that. But the principles themselves and the themes that we'll talk about next week, they become things that we don't compromise. They become things that we don't walk away from. And this helps PRINCE2 to be useful in a wide range of projects because we can adapt the details. So what PRINCE2 says in a nutshell is that there's not really a best practice. There's only the most suitable. And in fact, the best practice is typically whatever is most suitable in our given circumstance. Now, before we go to a quick poll, let's look at some quick questions. And we know, just so people know, we normally do aim for an hour on these discussions. The first week, though, we tend to go an hour and 15 because we've still got to hear from Jason in a few moments. The first week we kick off. But next week, we probably should be keeping things to around about an hour, depending on how many questions we get. Let's look at a few questions now.
Yeah, we've got a few listed as question live. Maybe a question from Cam. I'm interested in any difference in approach or the themes that should be applied to a program or a range of related projects as opposed to one discrete project.
So here it's going into program and portfolio management. PRINCE2 does have a relationship, a defined relationship between the management of programs and portfolios. And admittedly, that's not what we were planning to cover in this discussion, but the book does cover it. It does talk a bit about how programs and portfolios exist, and the decisions that get made at that level are very strategic. And there might be, and this is one of the advantages of PRINCE2, you might have a project that is very agile in nature. It's run in a Scrum methodology because it's delivering something very uncertain. It may even be software that's delivered with extreme programming. But then there's other part here, this infrastructure stuff. Well, that's a long drawn out project that's got a lumbering step by step, and that's going to use a waterfall method. And we may even use lots of PMBOK. But these principles that PRINCE2 operate with, they may be the guiding principles we use for all of them. So this is a way in which PRINCE2 can sit above and does and can sit inside that program and portfolio management space. And people can say, okay, well, as an organization, we're going to use the principles of PRINCE2 no matter what our project is. And it will work. That can be effective. Mohammed's got a question. The controlled environment, how can scope be changing? Please give us a few examples. So you might find if the question comes up of justification and say, well, you know, we were going to do, maybe we're doing something to improve customer satisfaction and customer retention. And we find that over the period of a year or half or 6 months, that what customers want changes. Maybe in that 6 months, our competitors are doing something completely different and customers love it. And that's not in our scope. We weren't going to do that because we thought we knew what our customers wanted. And we did 6 months ago. But now they've got new options and new alternatives, and we'll lose them unless we do something about that. So we might now say, from a PRINCE2 point of view, the principle of constant business justification says, well, if we just continue blindly delivering this, in another 6 months, we'll have spent our money, spent our time, and we'll still lose customers. Why? Because our competitors have done something even better. And we haven't. So that might prompt us to say, you know what, we need to change what we're delivering at the end of it. We need to change our scope. And PRINCE2 doesn't tell you what papers want, what forms to fill in. It doesn't tell you what tools and techniques to use. It just says, have that conversation. It says, figure that out. Use what methods are appropriate, but get that sorted and make it work. Next question, we've got benefits and why are already treated in the starting project in PMI. So all the time justifying and redefining the goal in PRINCE2. So why all the time justifying and redefining the goal of the project in PRINCE2? I think the example I just gave partly illustrates that. Because you might look at the question and say, okay, no, nothing's happened in the market. Our competitors aren't doing anything terribly crazy. We're on track to deliver something our customers are going to love. End of conversation. But what if it's not? What if all that stuff that you did at the beginning of your PMI project 6 months ago is old news because something's moved on, something's changed, something's happened? Your competitors have just bought some other little company and have added significantly to what they can do because they've just acquired a company and you didn't see it coming. Well, PRINCE2 gives us the question so we can decide what the answer should be. It asks us to revisit that question. That's why. Because these projects can take a long time. And, you know, if this was purely agile, we'd be asking that question every 2 weeks. But we might be using a waterfall method. We still have a reason to ask that question at every management stage, at every point of reinvestment, not every week, but we are visiting the question at the end of every management stage. Could be 2 or 3 times during the life of the project. Could be once in the middle of it. Depends on how big the project is. But that's the reason why we revisit it. Mike's asking, how do roles and responsibilities compare to RACI? That's actually that's terrific, Mike, because that helps me explain it. RACI is a tool that you would use in order to define roles and responsibilities. And it's a brilliant example of how PRINCE2 says, well, you use RACI if you want. I mean, I like using RACI. I think it's pretty cool. But it doesn't tell you to use RACI. It doesn't tell you this is what a RACI is and this is how you fill it in. Right? COBIT will tell you to do that. But PRINCE2 doesn't say that. PRINCE2 says you use the method that is most suitable for you, but get that sorted. So that's how you'd compare it. It's a good way of doing what PRINCE2 is asking you to do. Another question. I know PRINCE2 isn't prescriptive about the hows, but are there any resources that show how to set tolerances? And a lot of the processes, which we'll touch on in week 4, will address some of that question. So that's a question I want to postpone because I think we'll be able to cover a lot of that when we get to further on in the discussion.
And Brenton, given the time and given it's, you know, a lot of people's lunch hour, we might actually stop it there and maybe invite people to post any questions that they do have in the forum. We'll start that poll now, if that's all right.
Yeah, let's start the poll. So we've only got I want to try and finish the next couple of minutes. We've just got the wrap-up discussion, then we'll give Jason a bit of a chat. And I know everyone's sort of in their lunch break. So let's put this poll up. So the question is, which of these 7 principles do you think could have the most positive impact on project success in your organization? So which one is already most important, or which one do you think you should do more of? Like, which one sings out to you and says, geez, you know, this would make a difference?
And for those listening later on, continued business justification, learn from experience, defined roles and responsibilities, managed by stages, managed by exception, focus on products, and tailoring to suit the project. So they are the 7 principles. And from the looks of it, we've got the first 3 principles taking a lot of the chocolates, for want of a better word.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just start talking about this as the poll rolls out, because we'll save a bit of time. But continued business justification is the winner. It's already up to a third. And, you know, this makes sense because so many of us are so used to spending time on something that doesn't result in anything valuable, or we don't see the value, or the organization wastes it, etc. And a lot of projects get done purely because of the bane of sunk cost. You know, some money's been sunk into something, and we don't want to waste that by not producing something at the end. And a lot of projects that shouldn't continue do for that reason. And a lot of the time they're allowed to, because no one sits down and said, hang on, should we really do this? It's a scary question when there's sunk cost. And other project management methodologies don't force us to confront that as regularly as PRINCE2 does. So, you know, 34% of you right now would probably get some benefit out of doing more of that. The next popular was defined roles and responsibilities. I mean, how many times have we been in a project and we're just not too sure? Who does what? Whose job is this? Who do I go and talk to? When do I escalate this? You know, those situations where we didn't escalate it and the manager says, well, why didn't you tell me? Or we do escalate it and then they say, well, I don't have time for this. Or they say, yeah, okay, I'll get to it. All of this makes what we do less efficient. And when we're in the middle of it, you know, we really do struggle with this.
All right, I'll stop sharing that one.
All right. So a quick thing, let me close that. A few points on what this is all about, and then we'll talk about the activity. So PRINCE2 began in the UK, was designed from IT specific. It's become a flexible set of principles, themes, and promotions. It is intentionally built to apply to almost anything. And the principles are 7 concepts that underpin our decisions. Now, an activity to do in the forums, pretty easy one. Get up in the forums, pick one thing, think of a project that you've done. Think one thing that your project has done that demonstrates a useful, positive adherence to the principles of PRINCE2. Or one thing that they should have done better, where it got messed up, and a better adoption of PRINCE2 would have been better. So talk about that. Or if you prefer, you can just comment constructively to someone else's post. That's the activity for this week. Put a comment up there, positive or negative, or talk about someone else's.
And just, I've only just put that on the forum activity as a thread now, so you can all jump in there, and then there's also space for general discussion.
So how do you get a certificate at the end? I just want to remind people of this. You do need to complete the weekly activity. So put something in the forum about the activity each week. Do the 5-question quiz that'll get posted. I think today's quiz will get posted a little bit later today. Normally it'll be live straight after the webinar each week. There will be a final quiz at the end, which is 40 questions, but attending the webinars is not compulsory. You don't have to attend the webinars, but you do have to do the first 3 things. So take part something in the forums, the weekly questionnaire and the final questionnaire.
Beauty. All right, well, we might introduce Jason now. Jason, I'll just make you a co-host, and you can start sharing your screen at your leisure. Jason is from CSU. He is the associate head of the computing school, but he is here in his capacity as a PhD candidate for CSU today. And he's here to talk about so I'll just make sure he's around. There he is. And can you hear us, Jason?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, Jason.
Okay. You were worried, weren't you, Guy?
Oh, never worried with you.
Okay. Thanks, Guy, for the introduction.
Okay, looks like the voice has been lost. It's not just limited to me.
Okay, how are we going now?
Yes, got you back.
Okay, I'm going to make sure I don't press my little button there absent-mindedly. So I'll just go over that again. My name is Jason Howarth. I'm the Associate Head of School Computing and Maths with Charles Sturt University. I've been working with IT Masters now for about 13 or 14 years. And as Brenton alluded to a little bit earlier, we often use these short courses as potential tasters for people who are looking perhaps to undertake university study. So often I come on to these short courses at the end and give a brief marketing spiel about university and about Charles Sturt. And so because I'm also doing a doctorate, I thought it would be a really good opportunity to turn this into a research project. So that's Charles Sturt University there. I won't go too much into our institution tonight because I will talk about that again next week. But just as a brief summary, Charles Sturt is an Australian registered university with campuses across some major regional areas and partner operations in Sydney and Melbourne. We have around 40,000 students, of which around 26,000 are distance education. So it's a very big tertiary institution within Australia. So the project that I'm doing and that I'm kind of putting out a call for anyone who wants to get involved with is really about asking the question, does doing a free course, they're also known as MOOCs, so MOOC is an acronym for Massive Open Online Course, so sometimes I'll use those two terms interchangeably. Does doing a free course influence your decision to later enroll at either university in general or with the host institute in particular, in this case with CSU? So really keen to find out what effect these short courses have on your enrolment intentions, on your future study intentions, and also why you enroll in these free short courses. So for those wanting to get involved, I've generated a couple of surveys, one that needs to be completed more or less now at the start of your free short course, the PRINCE2 course, and another one that will be completed at the end of the short course for those of you who want to be involved. So it would be really much appreciated if you could help me get some data around this question. They're fairly brief surveys, no more than 5 to 10 minutes each, absolute max. You can find a link to the surveys on the discussion forum within the IT Masters PRINCE2 Primer discussion forum. Guy has very kindly posted a link directly into those surveys. You do the first one, as I said, now, and I will email you when it's time to do the next one. And that will help give me the data that I need to sort of answer this question about whether these courses have any effect on enrolment intentions. Now, one of the other things I want to speak about today is really about the benefits of university study. And it does in fact also tie in with the research project, because one of the things that is a common part of all of these short courses that we do is some marketing. And we would like to know whether that's effective or not. So typically I would do it in just one session, but I want to break it up into two small sessions, one about what I see as the benefits of university study, university enrolment, and some of the options available to you. And next week, for around about 10 or 15 minutes, we can look at specific courses from Charles Sturt University, including the Master of Project Management course. So bearing in mind that lots of people come from different backgrounds and may not be aware of all of the higher ed lingo, I just want to give you a crash course in some of that. Within Australia, higher education qualifications are defined under the Australian qualifications framework, and it defines a hierarchy of awards at that higher education level, ranging right from the lowest level, and these are of course after high school, the lowest levels of Certificate 1 and 2, right up to the highest levels of your doctoral and master's degrees. And they kind of form a continuum. So when you're looking at the lower levels, such as a Certificate 1, you're looking at things such as applying technical skills to routine tasks, and right up the top level, a doctoral degree, you're looking at the creation of new knowledge. So within that broad qualifications framework, of course, universities tend to focus on specific areas, more or less as a generalization from level 7 through to level 10, a bachelor's degree and upwards. So that's what universities are offering. And potentially, you may be interested in moving from a short course into one of these university course options. So just to give you an overview of the kinds of parameters and lengths that you're looking at with these different courses, typically at university level, you've got your bachelor's degree or your undergraduate degree, which part-time, and I suspect for many students in these short courses, part-time is going to be their likely option. You're looking at a 6-year part-time program. And this is not CSU specific. These are across the sector kind of parameters. Then we move into the postgraduate area where one of the increasingly popular offerings is what's called a graduate certificate. So it is a postgraduate award. It is towards the top of the AQF level, but you can do that in less than 1 year, okay, 4 subjects typically. Then you move to your graduate diploma, which is another postgraduate degree. You can typically finish that in around 1.5 years part-time. Then we move to our master's degree, which can be either coursework or research. Typically a master's degree in Australia, certainly with CSU, is 2 years part-time. And then you're moving on to your doctorates and your professional doctorates, which can take up to anything like 6 years of part-time study. That's a basic overview of the kind of products that universities offer. I'm going to focus mostly today just on giving you an overview of postgraduate and some of the statistics that I see as favourable to you considering enrolment in a postgraduate course. One thing you should be mindful of when you see things like graduate certificate or graduate diploma is that they typically nest inside the larger awards. So certainly at Charles Sturt, our graduate certificates, say for example, our graduate certificate in project management is in fact a subset of our graduate diploma of project management, which is in turn a subset of our masters of project management. And so that enables you as a student potentially to start in those lower awards, the grad certs, and then to move up the ladder, if you like, taking credit with you as you go. So it's quite an efficient way to study. But it is important to bear in mind that it's not necessarily a graduate certificate or a master's choice. A graduate certificate is a subset of a master's. And the reason I am focusing on postgrad here is because we know from the research that most students who enroll in free short courses or MOOCs are bachelor degree qualified. That's a worldwide statistic. So I'm certainly assuming if we're going to be looking at a short course to university pathway, it really is focusing on the short course to postgraduate level study. Just quickly want to look very generally at some of the entry pathways and study options that are available to you. These are broadly applicable, but they're certainly applicable also at Charles Sturt. So to get access into postgraduate level study, whether you're talking grad certs or graduate diplomas or even masters, increasingly universities are accepting work experience. Typically in the area, we're not talking about unrelated work experience, but if you have 3 to 5 years work experience in the area you're seeking to study at postgraduate level, there's a good chance you'll be admitted into those programs. So please, consider that. Of course, if you have a bachelor's degree as well, it's pretty much walk into a postgraduate program in certain disciplines. So work experience and bachelor's degree are 2 of the main entry pathways into these postgraduate programs. There's also mixed requirements where some courses might require you to have a mixture of a certain number of years work experience and a bachelor's degree. It is, of course, course dependent. But it's good to be aware of those basic enrolment options because many students assume that because they don't have a bachelor's, they aren't eligible for postgrad, or they have to go through that torturous 6 years part-time study at the bachelor's level, which is incorrect. Another key feature you should bear in mind when considering university generally is that these days, a lot of university study is available 100% online. That's certainly the case with CSU. but you'll see it's also a fairly broad worldwide phenomenon. So 100% online study is something that you can expect. And again, it works well with those coming from that online short course environment into a university course where both of them are in online mode. So I've just got a really quick screen dump there of one of our subject interact sites, we call it, that are offered at Charles Sturt University to give you a kind of indicative feeling that when you enroll in a subject within a postgraduate program at CSU, you have access, exclusive access, along with the other cohort of students, to information, your subject outline, forums, discussion boards, links to online meetings, and so on. So as Brenton alluded at the start of his presentation, the short course is a subset in terms of content of what's offered in a particular subject at CSU, but it's also a taster or a prelude, if you like, on the kind of delivery mechanisms that are now used at universities, particularly at Charles Sturt. So again, just giving you the really broad overview of what I see as some of the benefits of tertiary and in particular postgraduate study. Next week we'll focus on specific courses, but I've got these statistics from both the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but also a report from the Grattan Institute on mapping higher education. And for me, they were really, really insightful, and I just want to share them with you before we close out today. And one of them is the amount of degrees, the amount of Australians that are acquiring or have acquired a university degree over, obviously a very long period of time there, and you can expect that there's going to be a growth in absolute numbers. But even if you look at it as a proportion of the population, or as a share of the population, graduation with a university degree has increased by around about a factor of 9 or 10 since the 1970s. So it's escalating dramatically, not just in raw numbers, but as a percentage of the share of the population. I mean, what that means, of course, and I'm seeing it certainly in job interviews that I've been on, is that more and more people are presenting university degrees as part of their CV. So the reality is it gets harder and harder to cut through if you don't have a degree. That's that sheer escalation in degree prevalence in Australia. Another interesting statistic that I want to share with you about university education is the enrolment share by level for the different course types. So we're not talking here about raw numbers, we're talking here about the percentage of different course types over a 30-year period, and the enrolment share that they've gained. And you can see there that undergraduate has actually dropped, and the biggest growth area is in actual postgraduate coursework subjects. So we're seeing something like from around about an 11% to a 22% increase over the last 30 years in postgraduate coursework. I fully 100% concur with that if you can get a postgraduate qualification, if it is needed for your profession, I think it is absolutely the way to go, and there's a number of reasons for that. One is the time factor. Now, why have all of a sudden, or certainly within the last 30 years, but the real escalation I'm seeing is in the last 10, why have these postgraduate degrees grown so much in terms of interest and enrolments? One of the reasons is simply time. We mentioned that a graduate certificate you can do in less than 1 year, 4 subjects. A graduate diploma, and that's part-time. A graduate diploma, 1.5 years part-time. A master's degree, 2 years part-time. And remember our table at the start of the presentation, these certificates, diplomas, degrees are all at the apex or near the top of the AQF qualifications hierarchy. So it makes complete economic sense to be doing something that is esteemed and that doesn't take as long a time as, say, a bachelor's level program. So a very important consideration. Another factor that I've drawn from the statistics, this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics that I want to share with you, is the median salaries by degree. And this is simply reported from the ABS. And you can see there that as you move up the qualification level, and these are of course in thousands, and median means we're just kind of picking out the middle number of a range of submitted or published salaries. So the interesting point though, as you rise up the qualifications hierarchy, the median salary clearly increases. And one of the best jumps that you're getting in terms of an increase in raw dollars is when you move from that bachelor to that graduate certificate, graduate diploma level. And remember, they are very short courses, talking 4 subjects in one instance. So that's, you know, one reason why I believe the growth is being seen in that postgraduate level, particularly in the grad certs and diplomas. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck for a relatively small time investment. Another statistic I want to share with you, second last one, is employment factors and employment factors around qualifications. And you see the reverse happening. Once again, this is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, where they've mapped the unemployment rate to people having no qualification, to having sort of the low level AQF qualifications around the Cert 3s and 4s, moving up to diplomas, moving up to graduate qualifications, which in this particular survey cover everything from bachelor's to master's. And you can clearly see a tapering off there of the so-called unemployment rate that was done in 2015. The not in the labour force statistic there, I think refers to the fact that people aren't sort of actively looking for work, but you can see that that also tapers off as you move up that qualification hierarchy. So another reason to consider a university degree if you haven't got one, in particular postgraduate qualifications. Another really interesting one, and the last one I want to share with you because we are limited on time, is the level of public confidence in universities. And I know people do phone me up in my position talking about you know, which award is going to give them bang for their buck in terms of brand recognition. Should it be a MOOC, a short course? Should it be an industry cert? I mean, all of those things absolutely have their place, but just bear in mind that universities and university qualifications still have an extremely strong image, an extremely strong brand, which is obviously very helpful when, you know, you're putting that on your CV and going for jobs. I mean, interestingly, the survey this came from, I mean, it's been a lot of different surveys from different researchers. One of the surveys was an ANU researcher who found that public confidence in universities was in the top 3, and it was only beaten by the police force and the Department of Defence. So you're sort of up with those institutions in terms of public goodwill and confidence, which I think flows onto brand recognition and also, once again, bang for your buck if you decide to go down a postgraduate qualification pathway. Now, I don't want to dwell too much today because we are running short of time. I've spoken generally about some of the benefits of postgraduate qualifications, the statistics involved. Within CSU, of course, we do offer a whole suite of these qualifications in partnership with IT Masters. Brenton teaches in many of these different awards. And as I alluded to earlier, not only do we have Masters, we have associated graduate certificates that relate to those Masters. So it's not necessarily an all or nothing decision to study a master's program over 2 years. You can go and dip your toe in the water, do a 4-subject grad cert. As we saw from the statistics, very likely that's going to give you a fair bit of you know, bang for your buck in terms of what you're putting in your cost benefit return. And it's not an excessive commitment. Added to that, what you earn for the grad cert can be used later as credit into a master's, where effectively the length of your master's diminishes because of the previous work that you've done in the graduate certificates. So,
Jason, can I just interrupt? I just want to make a point of what I did.
Yep.
I did a grad cert in project management many years ago now, but that doesn't mean that I had to do a master's in project management. I did a grad cert in project management, and then I matriculated that into an MBA. So you don't have to go directly in the same, as long as the subjects you're doing can matriculate into a different master's, you can go in that direction, which is what I...
Yep, good point. There are some cross directional paths you can take, and Brenton's pointed out one. I've managed to spell in wrong. Grad Cert in Project Management, a lot of subjects in common there, say with the MBA Computing. So it's not necessarily a direct one-to-one mapping. You can start in one Grad Cert, end up in a different Masters. Obviously, the amount of credit you'll get depends on the commonality of subjects, but it certainly is an option if you don't want to go the straight Grad Cert Masters pathway. And I might add, a lot of students are happy just to take a Grad Cert, and that's their qualification. And the statistics show that that does give you a good return on investment in your workplace. So there's lots of different combinations there you can apply. So next week, I mean, I focused a little bit today on the benefits of university, on some of the statistics from the sector, on postgraduate qualifications and some of the cost-benefit returns you might see from those. Next week, at the end of Brenton's lecture, I want to spend about 10 or 15 minutes talking about Charles Sturt University in particular, the courses that we offer. In particular as well, I'll go through the suite of project management courses that we offer at the Master's, Graduate Diploma and Grad Cert level. We'll also talk about things such as the cost of those programs at CSU, any potential pathways, and of course, things such as credit. Do we recognise credit for industry certifications, etc., as a way of cutting down both the time and the cost of your study? So we'll look at that one next week. If you do need to contact me about anything, my details are on screen. Once again, could I please ask people if they would consider participating in the survey of this whole MOOC to university pathway study that I'm doing. And thanks very much for your time, and good luck with your course. I'll speak to you next week.
Thanks very much, Jason. Just a quick question. If people do participate, will they have access to any sort of results, or
yes.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that. All who participate will be given at the end of the research. I'll personally email out to you a PDF summary of the results of the study. So you get that inside information, if you like. I mean, the results will be published as well, hopefully in academic journals. No confidential information about individual participants will be shared, but everyone who participates, most certainly I will email you directly with a summary of the findings before they're published in the broader literature.
Great. Thanks very much, Jason. Yeah. Get on board, everyone. All right, well, I'll hand over to Brenton. I'll just say thank you very much to Jason and Brenton for their presentations today, and James and the gang from IT Masters in the back rooms. And thank you all for hanging around. I'll leave it to Brenton to tell you about next week and to sign off.
Yes, we're just about done. Thanks for that, Jason, and thank you, Guy. This is what you can expect next week. We will talk more specifically about tailoring in PRINCE2, how it works, what it means, what it does, and we will go through the 7 themes. So that's what's on the agenda for next week, and we will do our very best to keep it to an hour next week, because we won't have as much of the initial startup discussion that we had this week. So hopefully you can all have a tune in for that. If you can't, of course, grab the recording, and in the meantime, hop onto the forums, do the quiz and everything later in the day when it's all up there, and put your questions in the forums for all of the clever people we have around to answer them. But until then, that's all from us for now. Thank you, and good day.